I'm super curious where the ambulance like sirens are coming from. Like, is it Karachi?
That's me, probably. We have a very noisy road, niche, Khabane Ittihad, which goes insane like 5 p.m. onwards.
No, that
Also,
was
Lina, good to see you.
Myself, otherwise it's going to get very, very loud. So I'll only unmute when I speak for the sake of noise pollution.
Akash, we're live, right?
Yes, okay. Kashyap, you're live.
Yeah, okay. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Catalyzing Conversations organized by the Catalyst Labs. My name is Kashyap Jamal, and I'm the program manager of the acceleration program here at Catalyst. Today, we will be touching upon one of the most important sectors in our economy, that is education. Over the last year and a half, as the pandemic spread, we saw educational institutions go from completely shutting down to adopting virtual classrooms and now a hybrid model. This has starkly highlighted the inequalities in digital access and a significant need for innovation in the education sector, using mediums that can continue to function in a non-physical setting. To discuss this further and understand the revolution taking place in Pakistan, please allow me to welcome Deena Ahmed from Dot and Line, Mohammed Azib from EdAngle, and Faraz Ali from Noon Academy. I would like now to ask our panelists to give us a brief insight about themselves and their startups. So I think we can start with Azib.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Dr. Mohammed Azib. I'm the founder and CEO of MedAngle. And MedAngle is really about bringing a revolutionary change to medical education in Pakistan and beyond. We provide on-demand, hyper-personalized, and hyper-relevant medical education for students who are going through MBBS, BDS, and really anyone who wants to become a healthcare professional. We offer quizzes, questions, learning, concepts, and everything else that students need, making it a one-stop shop for medical education.
Thanks, Azib. Faraz, if you can go next. Faraz,
my name is Faraz. I'm the head of growth for Noon Academy. Noon Academy launched in Pakistan almost a year ago, and we're an after-school tutoring and after-school studying platform, and we target students in the K-12 segment. And yeah.
Lina, if you can go next.
Hi, so I'm Lina, co-founder of Dot and Line. Dot and Line has been there for about over 2.5 years now. In the last year specifically, it completely switched to online, considering the COVID pandemic that took place. We are an online tutoring marketplace where we match students to tutors. A big part of that, however, is that it's not just a marketplace. We go beyond the marketplace, considering that we also vet and train our teachers and then give them learning programs to be able to sort of teach from the platform. Over the last year, I would say, considering how well we match students to tutors, and also that focus upon the fact that this is a completely monetized model. So all our students currently are paid students. We started getting a lot of amazing tutors from other specialist backgrounds as well. So they are now sort of open to teaching their own content as well. Yeah, so it's been a great year with a lot of growth.
Thank you so much for that. Super excited to have everyone over here. So I'll start with a general question, and anyone can choose to answer this first. So now that we see that the world is going back to normal, things are kind of getting back to what they were pre-COVID days. Do you still think that digital education will be important, or do you see that trend sort of declining as we move back to a more, the new normal or pre-COVID times?
I can take that if no one else wants to answer. I can start. So I mean, based on the data and metrics that we've seen in the last year, and we've seen schools open and we've seen schools shut, and based on, I mean, Dot and Line works purely off of measuring not just tutor performance, but even a lot on the parent end. What we've really seen is that there was a huge hesitance to go online initially because we did pivot our model from physical to online. And we saw tutors hesitant to go online as well as parents hesitant to go online. And then when they sort of saw that, okay, schools are not opening, this is not going to change, a lot of them said, hum 2 mahine baad join kar lenge as a tutor or as a parent. We saw a huge spike. Now, considering that spike, we started seeing that within 3 to 4 months, parents started actually liking the online mode more than physical, because we're a hybrid model. We also have certain tutors teaching physically. We started seeing teachers liking that mode better simply because it was more effective. They picked up on technical skills. Some that weren't so tech savvy became super tech savvy within that few months of practice. And the same on the parent end: less commute, better retention, better sustainability when it comes to the parent and the tutor really optimizing the time of the child. So really, if you look at academic metrics in terms of optimizing the child's learning journey, we see a lot of interest in remaining online. Offline, however, is very, very popular, but
I can jump in real quick. I think Lena got disconnected for a sec there. So EdTech, obviously the COVID pandemic, and in the context of the pandemic, I think that there was obviously a lot of interest beforehand, and obviously this forced interest that spiked globally, we're seeing an all-time high, in my opinion. Naturally, I think that once things get a bit more back to normal, once we see the prevalence of EdTech, it will go down a bit, no doubt. I think just by virtue of a lot of people are more comfortable with more traditional, parents who have not really grown up with technology, or the generation that isn't really comfortable with it, they were kind of forced to, and some of them will convert to believers, but I think some of them are still inherently waiting for the conversion back to what they know and what is tried and tested for them. So I think overall, this pandemic has forced an increased interest that's here to stay. So I think the baseline interest for EdTech globally and overall the prevalence is going to permanently stay higher than it was previously, but it will obviously see a decline for a variety of reasons for some people, and for some cohorts, some groups. It really depends on what the use case is.
A big plus one on Azib's point about that this pandemic increased or accelerated adoption and consideration, and then there are certain parts of that which I believe will stick and remain even going forward. As a mass market player, known, so we've touched almost 2 million students so far in the past 1 year, and we saw similar trends like Lena mentioned that, we saw the spike when schools closed down, there was a spike. When schools reopened, then what happened? And then after 2 months, they sort of were like, okay, we have to live with this and we have to find options. But really what I've been very interested to see and learn about is the students and their journeys and their use cases and their experiences with digital learning. I think a lot of students have struggled to adapt to digital methods, especially those who are used to physical classes. And our numbers suggest that roughly 40% are used to physical classes even after school. But the remaining 60% of students, they already study on YouTube or study by themselves. So they're really okay with like the adopting digital methods. But now that the schools have opened, recently we've been, and the pandemic, it's sort of eased up, and now after school academies are also opening. We see a lot of students who still prefer going to these academies because it really suits them. And our main challenge and that we've taken upon ourselves is how can we sort of create a really good digital experience that they can find it easy to adapt to. But broadly speaking, I think digital adoption increased, accelerated, and a big part of that will remain going forward.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks for that. Faraz, Lena, do you want to continue?
Just one point I wanted to make there, which is one of the biggest factors why we feel and we've seen sort of remote and online learning really remain. It's commute. And I feel like commute in Pakistan is a big problem when it comes to retaining a student. And you see that because in the physical model that we had, and even till today, one of the number one reasons why a child will pull out of a class is कि गाड़ी घर में एक होती है, and या आप अगर कोई और भी mode of transport use कर रहे हो, that daily going to that academy or even for younger children, every single parent has always stated that is a struggle. A huge struggle. And looking at disposable income and the time you have, and the priorities you have, that commute, and then again finding something that's close enough to the child's home is one of the biggest factors why they drop out, and why we personally feel as a company, the online mode, once they got used to it, why it was very valued कि वो commute का पूरा element जिसमें time ज़ाया होता है या मुश्किल होती है गाड़ी में बैठ के कहीं जाने की, sharing the same car as a family, that's a huge plus point. Yeah.
Lena,
add
just
one
a
thing.
big
Go ahead.
plus on that, like the commute safety, it's much more safer, and parents love it when they can see their students studying. And one super interesting thing that I learned at noon was that there were some students who were neglected in physical classes. They're like the front benches get all the attention, and behind a screen, they find it easier to ask questions. They're not afraid to ask questions, and that was really cool for us.
Absolutely. One thing, even in medical school, so obviously Madding deals with medical students, so there is a hesitation, asking questions, engaging, not a lot of kids and a lot of students say they don't want to be seen as a kid who hasn't been question in class. And it depends on class sizes. Some medical schools have big class sizes where you won't get that attention. So when you have a personal and like a customized version for yourself, it's much easier. Also, I think there's a parallel to be said for remote work as well. I think that there is a parallel connection we can draw in terms of commute. I think Lena just talked about that. And I think these are really intertwined because if parents are at home working remotely, why can't their kids do the same thing? I think that there's something to be said for that very strong direct connection between the two. So I think we're seeing a resurgence and sorry, not resurgence, a massive increase in like employees don't want, and especially in America, the Western world, they don't want to return back to work. These big tech companies, these big tech giants, they're kind of facing backlash. Like, hey, we don't want to go back into the office. We're happy, to even take a pay cut or even relocate, but give us remote work. So I think this overall, once again, not just for EdTech, but in general for a lot of industries, this is a permanent shift in terms of the online adaptation.
No, thanks for that. And that actually brings me to my next question. And, as growing up for all of us, one important part of schools was to meet our friends and, hang out with them. I know while the other two are after school tutoring platforms, but what do you feel or how do you feel the engagement trend between students will change if digital was to become, let's say, their priority or physical schools was, were not there. So, and in your own platforms, have you seen growing engagement between peers?
Oh man, I'll take that. So peer-to-peer is like the core focus for Noon.
Yeah.
And we've seen like crazy kind of peer-to-peer engagements and student study groups being formed. One of the most amazing things that happened is so inside the app and during classes, you see a lot of engagement for sure. But then our students sort of formed a Discord server. It has like 3,000 active students, and that's really changed things. So like even at 3 a.m., like if somebody has a question, they like just write it down in the Discord server on the right subject, and then somebody just answers and somebody replies, and they're all studying together. And every hour, there's one thing called like, there's a command. If you write motivation, it sends motivational posters at you. We had to limit it to like once per hour. So like dot at every hour, you get a burst of motivation quotes coming in and just people interacting. So I think like Discord servers and other sort of social platforms, they've created this archetype and this model for building these communities, which are so, in some ways, they're so crazy. Like you can't form those communities in person physically. So I think it's so different, but it's so super magical what's happening right now in the digital space.
One thing I want to add is that, so at least for our platform, for MedAngle, so we're not peer-to-peer social learning currently, but one really cool thing that we saw and that really kind of took off was that we would hear reports of, and people telling us, students telling us, a group of medical students from first or second or so forth, they would get together on a Zoom call and then discuss the questions. They would discuss kind of the cases, the clinical situations together. And I think that was really interesting because that's not something we ever imagined. Like, wow, students are voluntarily hopping on a Zoom call with their friends and discussing things that are kind of complex, like a long clinical case, someone's sick, has a disease, how do you treat this? So we saw a lot of use cases like people on Zoom, Google, Hangouts, Meet, stuff like that. That was a really cool thing we saw as well. We're still seeing that as well.
And Lena, what about you? You're somebody who's who's run the platform on physical as well as online. How do you feel the engagement has changed over that?
Sure. So I mean, it's been really interesting. I feel like 30% of our students are international as of today, post-COVID. And उसके जो 2-3 बड़े regions हैं वो हमारे लिए after Pakistan is the UAE, Saudi, Australia, Canada, the Middle East being bigger. What I feel has been really interesting, although I feel like as an educationist, there is nothing that beats a multi-sensory environment where you're actually with each other physically, and I feel like that's important to a certain extent. But looking at the kind of newness that has come with online learning, I feel one of the biggest ones has been students from Pakistan and all across the globe, sort of the inclusivity of being able to study with people from everywhere, you know. So if a student is studying in Pakistan, आपके कुछ students हैं जो UAE से भी log in कर रहे हैं, कोई और मुल्कों से भी कर रहे हैं, then for that sort of inclusivity of being able to have that openness and the cross learning that takes place from individuals that actually don't come from our culture or come from different spaces, I feel like that's been really incredible. I also want to switch a little bit to the teacher side, because if you look at online tutoring, it is a super lonely job, and I think that's the one of the main things that popped up in research when we were looking at moving into this space. हर प्राइवेट ट्यूशन टीचर बोलती थी कि मैं अपने घर में अकेली पढ़ाती हूँ, मेरे लिए it's not the kind of environment like you have in a staff room where you feel like it's a career, you feel like you're associated with a brand. And I think online learning and us focusing very heavily on building a tutoring community, we've seen that just skyrocket during this time. So teachers sharing pictures of their classes, teachers talking to each other online and sharing ideas. कोई नई टीचर आई है, उसको लेट्स से कोडिंग सिखाना है, कोई कोडिंग की टीचर आपको बता रही है, you know, check this out, this is a new thing I tried. That to me, because really student growth is fueled by the potential of a teacher. That's our belief and vision as a brand. And so seeing that skyrocket during this time was very exciting. Because we believe in the power of a teacher. If the teacher is great, the growth will come, the student growth in numbers as well as learning outcomes. So really seeing that synergy during this time, students, so of course, it was very interesting to see, but seeing the tutoring side was very, very exciting.
So picking on that point, Leena, I had a question. So Dot&Line is a platform that also provides trainings to teachers for them to become tutors, right? And what do you feel are some of the changing roles and the new skill set that need to be adopted by these tutors and these teachers, especially if you're moving towards a hybrid learning system?
So just to touch upon a very exciting sort of figure, Dot&Line, of course, we were looking at the potential of women in Pakistan, right? And to us, someone and housewives majorly, there's about over 500,000 women in Pakistan जो पढ़ लेती हैं, excellent jobs करती हैं, and then they leave and quit the workforce. And for us, that was a huge target market to be able to train them to become phenomenal tutors with our learning programs. As a result of those tutors doing really well, we started attracting high quality tutors who are actually specialists and subject specialists. But till today, if you really look at the tutors that do exceptionally well, we see a lot of them are women who have never taught before. So could have been an ex-banker, could have been a physiotherapist, could have been, you know, someone who's an artist but decided that, you know, I want to start teaching math. Huge, and this is data coming from actually phenomenal learning outcomes of students doing exceptionally well with these teachers. So I do feel that that's one trend that we're looking at, the teaching as and what we sort of specialize in. हम tutors को recruit करना और उनको vet करके train करना is what we built in terms of our technology. And that's something that we're looking at very closely moving forward. You asked something else in addition to that. Did I miss something?
No, I was just saying, like, as we move towards digital or hybrid learning, do you think tutors or there's certain skill sets or there's a changing role that you see them sort of taking on board as opposed to teaching in a physical, physical setting?
Yeah, I think tech savviness is one really important one, and I feel like, but that's something that sort of it's self-learning, you know. For us, हमारी अम्मियों को फोन या Zoom नहीं यूज करना आता, तो वो टीचर्स भी वैसी हैं काफी हमारी. Some of them are tech savvy, but you throw them on a Zoom call for like 1 or 2 weeks, they'll figure it out. And I think that's as founders, it's really important to really constantly develop like and reiterate your product based on what feedback they're giving you, right? So I feel like optimizing for a tutoring network, at least Pakistan mein, our foreign teachers are very, very like good with tech. But really over here, it's really important to build products and build a user journey that is user friendly, but on the other side, making sure that you really train them to be able to understand how to use the technology well and how to respond to the differences and the sort of upskilling yourself during that time as well, right? And seeing how to sort of pick up on trends when it comes to that. If you have a group of students, like, and we see those trends. Some teachers want to teach a one-on-one, which may be high priced. Some want to teach a batch where they're optimizing for their time. It's more reasonable. So you're kind of looking at those trends as well. कि एक teacher का how are they best optimizing their time? Were they able to earn and also earn a good amount for the kind of value that they're bringing to the class, but also have an enjoyable setting to be able to learn and grow from each other.
Yeah, I see Faraz and Azim both have something to add. Faraz,
Yeah, I think one, definitely we have a new breed of teachers who are coming to the fore. That's awesome. And the second big thing is, see, normally a classroom ke andar, students are captive. They have no choice but to be there. So we are like a freemium platform. Students can come and go as they please. They are react buttons. If students don't like something, they're gonna do the sad smiley. And that has completely changed the way teachers approach this because students are no longer captive. It's their job to inspire them, to motivate them, and to engage them. And I think that one shift has been phenomenally big for us and helping teachers adjust to that. And some teachers, they start off saying, oh, we don't care so much about the reacts. But once they start the sad reacts coming in, they're actually concerned. What's my rating? Why is it down? And they start talking to students, guys, sad reacts kyun aa rahe hain? Kya hua hai? And then, they're adopting to student needs. I think that's just super cool.
no, that's very interesting. Azim, you also have something to say?
Yeah, I just want to share a funny anecdote. So we've been hosting some professors. So these are very senior teachers, for example, like a professor of cardiology, professor of surgery, medicine, and like having them live in a session and seeing the struggle with like, oh, well, sir, you're muted, or sir, your video's not working. And then seeing the students in the live commenting, reacting, the haha, like as Faraz said, like the haha reacts, the love reacts. I think that's not something I really ever imagined, but obviously the COVID pandemic really brought that into the limelight. So really just seeing that interaction between people who are so senior, who are so wise and so kind of experts in their field, and to see that engagement happening in real time, I think that's just something like it was a really entertaining, a really inspiring anecdote, I think, that we kind of saw and still are seeing as well.
So Azim, my next question is actually for you. So Medangle is a specialist platform, right, as compared to Dot online and Moon. So what do you think has been some of the advantages that you have for being a specialist platform? And how do you think that translates into retaining students to stay online with you or stay on your platform for a longer period of time?
Right, that's a great question. So I guess that there's two ways I can go about this. The first way is that I think that because we are so specialized, for example, we are very hyper personalized for medical students. So that means students are going through MBBS, BDS, and other fields as well. I think due to the specialist nature of the learning and the practice and assessment required, students have been interested even before the pandemic. This has been going on for many years. So I think for us on that front, we're not really particularly concerned about that. But in Pakistan especially, I want to share kind of interesting insight. So a lot of Pakistani medical schools across the country were not really prepared, and some still aren't really doing much when it comes to e-learning or EdTech for their students. So I think the COVID pandemic for us has shown that the demand was there. And now, because the educators and the decision makers at all these medical institutions around the country, because of this forcing function, now all the students will realize that, hey, the school itself has taken steps to validate and really bring further legitimacy to education technology for my medical school or my dental school. So I think for us, the demand was there to begin with. It's not going away anytime soon. And I think, again, going back to what I said earlier, is that demand chart, that demand curve is only permanently shifted upwards, because now the people who resisted the decision makers or the people who are more senior, kind of being away from it, not really having to deal with it, now that they've gone through it for a very long time, it's just increased legitimacy all the way through from an institutional side, and obviously from the consumer or the student user side as well.
All right. Thanks, Azim. For all the attendees, if you have any questions, you can send it to me on the chat and I can take them as well. Okay, so coming to Faraz, and Moon, as also mentioned, is a social learning app, and you touched a bit upon the peer-to-peer aspect of this. So that's what I wanted to ask. And peer-to-peer is something that can be easily replicable as well, right? Do you see any advantages of peer-to-peer? Do you see a trend where you could have groups of students just coming together and studying without the presence of a tutor? And if yes, how do you think that affects the learning? So it's essentially kind of like taking group study sessions online, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So on multiple levels there. So the first thing that peer-to-peer enables is for you to have a really large classroom. So let's say normally when you're talking about cohort-based courses, I haven't heard of cohorts that are bigger than 500 students. And that too, you need some sort of peer-to-peer activities within that to make learning really effective. But so we've incorporated things like breakouts and group activities where, let's say we have 2,000 students in one classroom during one session. We break them out into groups of 5. We throw a question at them, they discuss it between each other, and they put in an answer, and they're competing with other teams and so on and so forth. So one thing it does is that it enables massive cohorts. And with that scale, there are certain efficiencies and certain opportunities that open up, whether that's about bringing a price point which was unimaginable if your cohort was smaller. So you can have better price points, more accessibility. The other thing in peer-to-peer is availability. So right now, even though we have like almost like 100, 120 teachers who are teaching with us every week, and they have like 700 hours of live sessions happening, they can still only do it, let's say 2 hours per day. But students are coming online and they want to study all the time, right? And there are other students who want to study at the same time as well. So let's say you want to study quadratic equations, you log on and then you're like, 4 other people also want to study quadratic equations. Then you get together clubhouse style and you go through a video and you attempt questions together. So I think that's amazing. One use case that we think that has really helped us is practicing. So practicing is a really solitary thing that students have to do, but building features in which you can get together with your group with peers and you practice together really makes it easy. And eventually what we really want to solve for is motivation. Like Pakistan mein and in our region, there are basic problems like teacher availability, infrastructure, etc. But once you go past that, the biggest problem is motivation. And peer-to-peer really allows you to scale motivation, scale engagement in a way that teacher one-to-one, it won't work, but peer-to-peer opens up those opportunities.
Thanks for that, Faraz. And now coming to something which is again a general questions, and again, platforms and models like yourself, Dotted Line, MedAngle, there can be a huge potential of these spreading across to areas where there's lack of resources to set up and run physical schools. But a major part of that is obviously the role of the government. And that's something that I wanted to ask. What do you think is the missing infrastructure that is currently stopping access of these models in areas where, there aren't enough educational resources, there aren't any teachers to set up physical schools? And what do you feel could be some of the, low-hanging steps that the government can take to change that?
Yeah.
So
one thing for us, and this is actually an issue for us in some of the medical schools that we are currently working on, this ability of power and high quality or at least reliable internet access. I think that at the very minimum, I think these are very, very low hanging fruits that can be kind of addressed. So investment in telecommunication, the telecom industry, the government kind of joining hands to build out at least reliable internet access to as much of the population as possible. At this rate, I think it's a fundamental part of life. And students not having access to that, no matter where you are in the world, I think that's the biggest thing. I think at least for our use case, for kind of our journey, medical students complaining about, well, we would love to use certain aspects of your platform, but we cannot because we don't have reliable power or even internet access fast enough. So if we can at least address that to begin with, I think that we can tackle the more systemic or deeper issues. But really, these are the two things that immediately come to mind that would rectify quite a few issues, in my opinion.
Faraz.
Yeah, internet infrastructure, really need better internet infrastructure. It's exceptionally bad outside urban cities too. So, I mean, it's compared to regional numbers, the ping rate and the call and the bandwidth, etc. Even in the urban cities, it's slightly poor. But in the non-urban cities, it gets worse. So I think that is one thing that would radically shift it. One other thing, and especially in the K-12 space, that is very, one big trend that you see is that you see a massive dropout ratio after primary school. And we have so many students who dropped out of primary school, but now they're like 15, 16, and they just want to study. And if they had an option like the GED, like some kind of diploma they could attend, like complete some courses online, get like a metric inter degree or something, that would be awesome. Other than that, by the way, like I found the government to be super supportive of what we are doing and super supportive of all educational initiatives. But yeah, these are two big things that come to mind.
Yeah, so just to add to that, of course, internet to sabse badi baat hai. feel the same. We feel like in peri-urban areas, we also suffer from the internet issue. But of course, you go rural and it's like many regions are just wiped out, right? It's really difficult for them to even study, and they rely mostly on their mohalle ke teachers. Yeah, the government schools hai, the ghost teachers are very, very like you don't have them attending schools either, right? In my mind, I feel like if you're looking at the rural sort of mass route and peri-urban areas as well, a lot of children, as Faraz mentioned, they drop out. Now, when you drop out, and if you just pick up one subject, one of the most important ones, literacy, चाहे अगर वो उर्दू में हो या इंग्लिश में हो, अगर आप एक certain age तक आपने phonemic awareness या पढ़ना नहीं सीखा और आप 15 साल के हो गए, then there's something which you need to do, which is of utmost importance, which is correctional learning. You need to go back and learn as an adult how to read, because your brain has now developed at such a high scale that you cannot sometimes go back and learn just the way a 5-year-old would pick up phonics. And so that's a big piece that I think would really help. As adult literacy programs, for example, Faraz suggested a couple of other courses, but really going back to the root. And if you're learning, as in your programs need to be developed for adults that are now going back to learn simpler things that they missed out back then, which I feel is really important. It's kind of re-looking at your population, not from a lens of, okay, you know, how do we make it better? Yes, you currently have schools, you have children enrolled, but it's literally going back and doing the recovery of those that never learned. And the way that they have to be and should be learning looks very different from a student who's already enrolled. So I think that's a bit of a lens and a perspective shift when it comes to developing programs for teenagers that completely missed out or missed out on a whole couple of years of learning, right? Which is one of the biggest problems we suffer from in rural and peri-urban areas.
Lena, thank you so much for mentioning that. That's so awesome. Yeah. And like literacy training would actually enable them to use all the tools in the universe out there, right? Like if they have that base, then they can use all of the tools out there to keep learning. And yeah, I think that's super cool.
Sorry, I think my internet. Hello, can you guys hear me?
The irony, you know, we're just talking about internet issues in urban areas.
Well, they're there in our areas as well. So again, and Lena, so another question for you, and because you have, you know, in terms of for dot and line, especially when you were starting out, what do you think was a bigger issue in the sector? Do you feel there was a lack of supply of good educationists, or do you feel there was lack of demand from students? And how did dot and line go about to address that?
I don't think there was any lack. I think the market is massive and the problems are vast. And it's just about really going out and putting, you know, offering what you have. We didn't see a lack. We saw maybe raised eyebrows, question marks, you know, कि मैं teacher क्यों बनूं? आप कैसे कह रहे हैं कि हमें ये training मिलेगी और फिर हमें students मिल जाएंगे? It was more of like questioning whether, as an early business, questioning whether there would actually be any outcome of what we were proposing to them. But once the teachers were trained and they were kind of given our learning programs, which are world-class learning programs, they've been developed over 2 years, and they've shown phenomenal sort of you know, boost in grades for students that have remained with us. I mean, the effect of that was just, even today, 60% of our teachers come completely organically. And on the student side, it's a very similar metric. All our growth has, and we've grown 10x in the last year. It's been mostly word of mouth. And I feel like education is a space which is so heavily built on trust. A parent will go to and attend or sign up for something if someone else has said it's good. And so we've seen the same effect on the student side and the teacher side. Teachers joining us, as I said, who were specialists in subjects, simply because they've heard that, oh, if you become a Online tutor, you'll have a class of students that's filled up within 2 to 3 weeks, and you'll be earning an income from the comfort of your own home, which is really a value prop for the teachers. And on the student end, we promise all our customers that we'll find the perfect tutor for you for whatever your child wants, whether it's a one-on-one, whether it's a friendly tutor. And we've seen these interesting metrics even when matching tutors to parents. Like a parent, for example, even has a preference, which I find really interesting, कि सारी tutors अच्छी हैं, but मुझे ज़रा friendly tutor चाहिए अपने बच्चे के लिए, या मुझे ज़रा strict tutor चाहिए अपने बच्चे के लिए. My child works better with someone who's a little boundary driven and not so happy and jolly. No, my child works better with a teacher who's super fun and like friendly, right? So even kind of our matching and our algorithm is going as deep as that, where we're looking at personalities now, and we're looking at what can make a child learn best. It's not just black and white, it goes much deeper than that.
Thanks. Thanks for that, Lena. Faraz, moving on to you. So in your opinion, where do you feel digital education can play a huge role in the education sector? Do you feel it can replace physical education at any time, or do you feel both physical and digital can go hand in hand, where they're complementary to each other? And what do you think the trend is going to be?
Right now, I'll tell you some numbers. So every day on YouTube alone, back in 2017, globally, you had 500 million views related to education and learning. After the pandemic, that number is at 5 billion views daily. And you see two major use cases: students studying on their own and students relying on some kind of support and structured program. And the fact is that whenever you're going through school, you will have some kind of a formal program, and then you will have to study on your own. And when you're studying on your own, you will need support. And so I see like both of these programs running side by side. If we had to sort of, let's say, if you were pushed to a corner, we had to replace schools, physical schools with digital, we could do it. But I think it, like Lena mentioned, multi-sensory approach and giving students the choice to go multi-channel. Like we've made e-commerce multi-channel, we made everything multi-channel, increasing the touch points like crazy. So I think we need to give them the choice and allow them to build these hybrid models that suit them. Each student has like unique needs, and I think this will really allow students to build needs and solutions that are personalized for them and that help them in their study goals.
Sorry. Azib, so coming to you, and because you deal with a lot of your work is with universities or dental colleges, medical colleges, where let's say attendance is not such a big, it's not that big a deal. Parents can no longer force kids to attend universities, and they've got platforms. If there are platforms like yours, do you feel that these platforms in a higher education could replace that, where people would rely more on these digital platforms and choose not to go to universities and colleges? And is that something that you've seen happen with all the colleges and universities that you work with?
So I think it depends on what sector you're talking about. So for medical education, law, like stuff that's a bit more regulated and requires a higher level of completeness or high level of technical work or technicality, I think that no, just by virtue of the education that's required, I don't think people would be comfortable if their surgeon walks in and said, well, I only attended, Zoom University. I think that really would really go well. So I think for certain things like maybe computer science, programming, stuff that's not exactly always regulated, especially in the Western markets, I think for that, absolutely. And I hold a more contrarian point of view. I think even for medical school and some of these industries or these sectors, I personally hold the belief that I think that certain aspects of medical school can be made obsolete. Based on my understanding, based on my experience over the past couple of years, I do believe that there are a lot of inefficiencies in higher education. I think that they're just there to, either it could be because that's how things have been done, or that's the current status quo. But I hold a more extreme point of view. I do think that we'll be seeing a trend where a lot of schools, a lot of programs, their first couple of years or aspects of those programs will be rendered obsolete, and institutions have to catch up and understand, well, how do we innovate further? How do we replace and deal with this shift in terms of paradigm for online learning, online platforms? So I think that we will see this, and perhaps it's a more extreme point of view, especially when it comes to law school, medical school. But I do think that this will happen within the next decade at the very minimum.
Okay. Thanks for that, Azib. And so this is again a general one for everyone. So we've seen globally EdTech models become billion-dollar companies, right? Some of them, and they all follow different models. Some of them have been complementary to school education. Some of them aim to provide resources outside of set curriculum, where they'll be offering writing courses, coding, programming, all of that. For a country like Pakistan, and especially in the stage where we are at, what models do you think are likely to succeed? And which ones do you feel are what's required in a more local context?
So like I think they're like $7 billion EdTech companies. I think 2 of them went public, so maybe 9. And the ones that went public are Duolingo and Coursera. So a majority of these are either tutoring or language, and they're based in India, China, or the United States. One of the interesting ones is like OutSchool, that's tutoring, but that's supplementary learning. So I think through China and India, we know that anything that helps social mobility, helps access to opportunities, helps your positionality, which will give you better access to economic, better economic future. I think those things definitely have the economic sort of model built in where you could do that. So like tutoring and language and supplementary learning. So these are the models where it's already been done. Yeah, I'll yield my time for the remaining panelists.
Azib, Nina, do you have any thoughts to share on this?
Yeah, I feel what we haven't seen so far is, or at least if you look at India, if you look at, for example, Byju's, इस साल से पहले we hadn't really seen major complete app learning penetration as such. It was something very new. And even now, if you look at it, like complete app learning with no tutor present or just kind of having quizzes that you're learning off of is something still that I feel is going to take a little bit of time. It could be a great spike. But looking at the cultural setting of learning coming from a teacher, and then a lot of it being more than a $4.5 billion industry when it just comes to private tuitions in Pakistan. It's going to be interesting to see that shift of having a tutor and then also children using technology purely for themselves to be able to learn without a tutor. So I feel while there's a huge sort of space that we're seeing explode right now when it comes to tutoring and using tutoring as a mode online to be able to learn, I feel like that last shift जहाँ पे आप बिल्कुल ही solo हो जाते हो with the technology and you're kind of learning with just tech is something that I still feel we have a little bit of time to get to. I see a lot of excitement. अगर हम अपने खुद की metrics देखते हैं, even like for us, as you're looking at OutSchool or you're looking at Vedantu, which just raised a great round and became a unicorn in India, you're either pitching your content like OutSchool, where you're saying, hey, we're doing Harry Potter classes and that's our game, our game is content, or you're pitching a tutor and saying, our tutor is phenomenal. So I think it's going to be exciting, and we see that here as well. Whenever parents and we get like so much demand every day, they always, when they come to us, they're like, who's the tutor? Like, tell us her background. What does she sound like? What does she look like? Uski highest ratings for us for tutors who convert or at least are able to sign up students is the simple English language notion as well. How good is her English? For parents that are coming, even if it's low middle class or even the lower income segment, as aspirational parents, you see them wanting their children to learn with someone whose English is at least at a good sort of point. So I feel these factors all add up to student learnings and what parents are willing to explore, especially in the K-12 segment. I feel like higher education may 8th, 9th, 10th grade, the students themselves are kind of picking and choosing what they want to do. But for the young learners, I feel it's interesting to see this dynamic come through where they're kind of looking at, is the content good? Is that the hero of this company? Or is it the tutor that's good? Who's the hero? What's the good point here? And then I think the second phase will sort of be going towards complete online learning, which is like either completely like where there's no sort of, it's just like quizzes or just, online exploring, a student exploring by themselves essentially.
Azim,
I want
you have.
to add to this. Yeah. So absolutely, I completely echo what Faraz and Lina said as well. But the way I want to think about this, and the way I'm thinking about it right now, is that if we talk about present and future. So present, I believe that the big winners, the unicorns, the ones who are going to go on to raise, big venture rounds and kind of, either go public. I think that the present day, the best case scenario, in my opinion, is that those companies which will employ a hybrid model where trust is not fully formed. I think in those markets and in general across the world, parents and those who are paying or footing the bill for such services, they'll prefer something that has some sort of tangible element to it. So it could be a hybrid model where you have online assessments and online performance tracking or online stuff like that, but then it's combined with a tangible physical presence as well. Potentially, it could be tutoring centers, it could be learning centers, whatever it may be. But I think that's the present. The future, I believe, as Lana said, I think it is where we will shift to a dominant online MO where students know that they can come online, they can get customized, personalized, relevant education materials, tutors, whatever they need. And as global infrastructure, as these things kind of accelerate globally, I think we'll see that shift, that it'll flip into minority physical, majority online. It's a matter of time.
Faraz, I see you also raised your hand on this.
Yeah, just one thing I'd like to add. So, in EdTech, you have certain businesses that focus on a B2B model or delivery of education and technology for classrooms. Compared to that, I think the next big sort of companies will be student first for sure. So they're going to be targeting students. And just one problem we have, I find this very interesting, is okay, Byju's is big, right? But when we dig deep into what Byju's does is they sell these subscriptions to parents, and it's a completely operational sales driven model. It's like selling encyclopedias almost. And you go out and you do this and you convince parents के शर्मा जी का जो बेटा है ना उसने तो बायजूस ले लिया है और वो आगे निकल जाएगा, आपने नहीं लिया है तो okay, if you're not interested in your child's education, that's good. But that's enabled by having a really large middle class. It's the large middle class that ends up spending on education. One of the challenges, and I'm speaking for myself right now, is shrinking middle class or so in Pakistan context. So we don't find that kind of, that's one challenge, especially when I compare success of Byju's or an academy or Vedantu with sort of just a Pakistani context.
Okay, thank you for that. Faraz, we also have a question from one of the attendees. So Joseph says, in your content, how do you strike a balance between what students need for curriculum and examination purposes and what builds natural curiosity, love for learning, and 21st century skills? So this is open to the panel.
I can take that. We've done a lot of content development. Hi, Jazeb. Hope you're doing well. So I think that when it comes to us, and we've built math, English, and coding as three sort of our own programs. I think the key is that curiosity and critical thinking has to be built in the curriculum. So for example, if you're teaching fractions, and that's how we've done it, we will go and teach fractions and use examples that are sort of locally embedded. Our names in the content are all local. We'll pick real world examples. So hum jab fractions ke bare mein baat kar rahe hain, we're talking in terms of samosas and pakoras and gola gandas versus something that is taught like Jack and Jill or very basic. So I feel that we have seen students learn and understand and explore curiosity by embedding that as a lens within your content, but then also covering the curriculum, because every parent here wants those topics to be covered that are taught in school. And I think that's a large part of why they come for after school learning. So it's really about showing them, and I would say about 80% of our parents sign up with us when they see our content. It's about showing them that we teach it differently. It's the same topics, but it's just taught in a far more sort of real world sense. I think that children and 21st century skills is about sort of having a rational mind that is looking at logical reasoning and critical thinking. Aapko aage ki jobs to nahi pata kya hongi, but if you're a smart enough person who's been taught in a manner where you can put two and two together and solve problems, then you can go ahead and pick up on those, whatever skills they are in the future. So I think for us, a really big part of that is embedding the current, that curiosity and logical reasoning and problem solving within the content. that is taught in school. So it looks a little different, the lens is different, but essentially it is subtraction and addition and division and fractions and decimals. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks for that, Leena. I see Faraz also has his hand raised.
So one of the things we've realized is the relationship of the student with the teacher is half the sort of like motivation to learn. And we talk to students about the kind of teachers they like, and they mention some similar things. They're like, oh, this teacher is super passionate about what they're teaching. Oh, this teacher is really funny. And then we find teachers who find a way to sort of build in relationship building with their students, being funny, being charismatic, together with a real expertise in their subject. So what they do is they build a relationship, they have fun with the students, etc., but then they also teach really well. So that's one way. So in summary, it would be relying on these great teachers, and the relationship building skills with the students is also one thing.
So one thing I want to add to this is that, so for our business, our startup, basically, because we're dealing with students who have kind of gone through school, they're kind of obviously in higher education. So that motivation necessarily, it's not about enthusiasm, it's more about they're on a solidified path already. So they know that they need to continue on this to become a doctor, become a dentist, whatever it is. So I think for us, the way we're approaching it is that we want to make sure that to drive the optimal engagement and the best learning outcomes and experiences, that they need to see what's relevant for them. So what exactly are the things that they need to know as a future doctor, as a future dentist, and as per their journey through medical school or dental school. So for us, it's not necessarily about the enthusiasm. It's more about how do we make sure we can help you, how do we help you learn what you need to learn at the right time, and keep track of what you're learning, so that when it comes time for you to actually become and start practicing as a medical professional and so forth, you should be ready based off your body of work over the past 4 or 5 or whatever amount of years that you have to go through medical education.
Thanks for that. And another question, and I'm going to ask next is, so EdTech and FinTech, right? These are currently the two buzzwords. Do you see a trend where EdTechs will eventually also start partnering or offer services related to FinTech or vice versa? And if you do, what are some of those services that you feel there can be synergies? Again, open to the panel. Faraz.
So one thing we've already seen in EdTech is helping families finance spending money on EdTech. So in India, for example, they partner up with these non-state lending institutions, which offer financing options. Because, you know, parents ka wallet kafi stretched hota hai, so if you can help them afford, that's one thing where it really helps. On the other side, like in our part, like when you're trying to build a digital marketplace, transactions ideally should happen digitally, but like there's such a big cash component, and if that's one thing, if we're able to crack, like if we're able to have the adoption of digital payments, that's of course a no-brainer that we're going to be doing.
Totally agree with Faraz on that one. I feel like the cash piece is a huge struggle. And even when it comes to digital payments, it's something that is not perfected yet. There's so many gaps even now. And looking at even, for example, international payments, udhar bhi, at least we've seen a lot of struggle when it comes to the payment side. And that's a piece that's not solved yet. So it is exciting to see so much like the buzz in fintech, and I feel like it'll be a matter of time where we'll be able to see synergies sort of pop up. What they look like, I think right now it's still a little murky because there's a lot of shifting and changing happening as startups are raising funding. A lot of them are pivoting. I think to see a clear model right now, I think, you know, in a year or two or 3, we'll be able to see what really the substance that each is bringing to the table. Let's put it that way. And then it will be exciting to see synergies, because I feel there is a lot that can be done between EdTech and FinTech.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that. And one example that I found pretty interesting is that in the West, in Silicon Valley, like startups like Lambda School and ISAs, where we have income share agreements, I think that is potentially the future. But again, as Lance said, it's a bit murky. It's a bit premature in terms of how proven those models are, and in terms of how effective they could possibly be. However, I think the door is now open. I think the box has been opened to now really, you know, prove the markets and prove globally how effective can such programs really be. So that's one thing that I think can be an intersection of fintech and edtech. And I think there will be a lot more activity in space within the next couple of years and starting. I mean, it's going on right now, but I think right now it's time to prove these models and see how effective they really are.
Azim, we have a question for you from the audience. So do you think that orthodox mindsets of the faculty in medicine and dentistry can be flexible enough to allow for EdTech startups like MedAngle to bring such an innovation to the most competitive community? And how do you plan on tackling these hurdles?
That's a good question. So this is something that we've kind of been dealing with as well, in particular if you're in medical education and higher education that we've been kind of talking to and have experiences with. I think that COVID-19, I think the direct answer to this, I would say, is that COVID-19 and a global pandemic has been a blessing in this regard, because if it wasn't for this, they would continue with the status quo and they'd be like, that's okay, because we are professors, we're teaching medicine, surgery, these very hands-on skills, stuff like that. So I think that's one way that's really proven, I think permanently, globally, that these things can work. And because their own medical schools, as I alluded to earlier in this conversation, it's been proven, and they were forced. It was a massive forcing function for them. So I think thanks to that, now that the door is open regardless for that conversation to occur, where previously that conversation was not even liable to even potentially happen. So that's one way I would think about it. And yes, I would say that in some places, the more conservative, the older school methods are still obviously very prevalent. But now, again, these doors are now open. So anything can go. Depends on how you approach it. So anything can happen, really, I'd say.
Faraz, you also have something to add.
Yeah, since I can empathize with Dr. Azif, I think one other way he's tackling it is one day at a time, right? Like one day at a time, slowly converting. You convert one person, then another day you convert two people, and aista aista karwan ban jayega, hopefully.
That's exactly how it is.
No, so it's almost 4:57. We're at the end of the webinar, and so just in terms of closing remarks, can you touch upon what are some of the trends that you will see in the EdTech sector? Do you see some consolidations happening? We've already seen, we've seen the takeover of EdCasa. We've also seen some global players like Moon enter the market. Do you think that is going to continue? What are some of the trends going forward that you see in the EdTech sector? We'll start with Azim.
Yeah, I think consolidation is a trend we're seeing. Baiju's by acquiring companies in the West, even. So I think that was a pretty big move. They're making pretty big moves in terms of acquisitions. I think, yeah, because education, again, earlier it was alluded to that trust is a big pillar of education. If you can't trust the learning you're getting, the education you're getting, then I think things fall apart. So consolidation, I think inherently will lead to that, because you can trust a big name, you can trust a big brand. So people trust Google and Microsoft because they're well-known established brands. So I think consolidation is going to continue. I think it might even increase in terms of bigger players buying up new innovative startups. I think apart from that, one personal trend that we personally at MedAngle are looking at is how do you apply the next generation personalization and adaptation to a student's learning, especially for higher education. So I think EdTech players, or anyone who is running a business or a company, when it comes to very specialized or niche learning, if you can figure out how you can perfect or get as close to perfection as possible in terms of highly relevant, highly contextual materials, as students go through their education, I think they'll be really big winners. But I guess summary would be that consolidation, of course, because of trust. And I'd say for more niche communities or more niche companies, hyper-personalization is very key.
Faraz, if you can go next.
Yeah, just very briefly, I think since Noon entered the market, I think investors, VCs who do EdTech, they've been super interested in Pakistan because of our numbers. They see a big addressable market, so they see big numbers. And I think, so that's definitely going to continue. And if we can find a way to crack the PMF, especially in terms of revenue models that work together with getting a big share of this TAM, I think this trend is going to continue. And yeah, I think we're going to do it, by the way, in Pakistan. So this space should be going up.
And lastly, Leena.
Yeah, I feel like when it comes to EdTech, it is an exciting time for us. I don't like talking about acquisitions and stuff. It's exciting. I know it excites everyone, but I feel like the core of any founder's heart and soul is to build the best company that is providing the best product or service. And then if something is doing really well, then yes, you will see synergies and people will want to acquire you. But the focus always is building the best to get you anywhere. When it comes to learning, I feel another thing that we really need to be, or I think it is happening already, is that learning also changes as times are changing. And so really building a company which has a certain model or a product or or a piece of like, like a content that you're offering, one needs to have a very open mind to continually optimize it as times change. Just looking at times changed in the last year, so much has happened, and I think companies have really kind of picked up and shifted around the way they think, and I feel like education is no different. We'll have to be able to pick up on trends, whether it comes to teachers, how they can optimize themselves, students, how are they optimizing their learning. As Azib mentioned, personalization is huge. The way students spend their time, the way teachers spend their time, it's all looking different, much like the workspace is looking different today. How we're working from our own homes or remote working. These are all trends we need to have a really open mind to moving forward. And I think we're on our way to that, and it'll be exciting to see that sort of pan out here in Pakistan, and globally we're already seeing it as well.
Thank you so much for that, Leena. And again, thank you, Azib, Faraz, and Leena for taking out the time to be here. I think it was a great session. We got some great insights. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Thank you for having me.
Bye, bye, everyone.
Appreciate it.